Well, you've heard who I am. I'm Mayor Randy Henderson. This is a contest, and I do believe, in all sincerity and due humility, that I am the most qualified candidate for this contest. I'm a husband, a father, a businessman, and the mayor of Fort Myers. I'm in my 11th year as mayor, the only three-term mayor in the history of our 140-year-old city, and I was elected first to office in 2000. I've managed our city through the same conservative principles that our president has managed our country. We have done it with great success. We've managed our tax burden, we have kept our spending low, and our city is doing the best it has done in its history. I am the best candidate because I'm the most experienced candidate, and experience means successful as well. I am a successful, experienced candidate. I can help Donald Trump because I'm experienced and successful, and he needs a businessman who knows how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. And now we have Mr. Kowal.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for inviting me to this club tonight. I can tell you right off the bat, I am not a politician. Never was. I'm a public servant. My name is Daniel Kowal. I'm a veteran. I've been a law enforcement officer my whole career, my adult life. I'm a family man. I consider myself an American patriot. The reason I should go to Congress is because I see the people every day. I see the people that most politicians don't see every day. I hear their concerns. I see their concerns. And I'm going to be their voice because they're a silent majority that live in Southwest Florida that don't have a representative. And I'm going to be that for them. I'm going to be that voice of those people that sometimes are overlooked by our politicians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Representative Eagle, you're up.
Well, thank you, Mira, and everyone here at with the Ladies Leading Right, the lead Republican woman of Cape Coral, and Personal Touch for hosting this. This is so good to actually be in person and see faces and not look at a Zoom screen. So appreciate everybody coming out for this. Why I am the best candidate for this is because I have the most to offer. I'm born and raised right here in Southwest Florida. This has always been my home and always will be. I look forward to welcoming my son to this world this month, and he will too be born and raised in Southwest Florida. But more so than that, it's about leadership. I went to Tallahassee in 2012 to represent this community because we were failing after a rough economy. We're in that once again. So I spent my 8 years in Tallahassee fighting for you, rose to Republican majority leader, was able to get phenomenal things done like banning sanctuary cities, passing E-Verify, cutting taxes by $10 billion over the last 10 years. Now it's clear we need consistent representation in Washington for CD19, not someone who's going to go up there to check a box on their resume, but who's going to fight for this community, and I'm your guy. I'm asking for your vote. You can learn more at daneeagle.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Fitzenhagen.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here tonight. My name is Heather Fitzenhagen, and I'm a pragmatic, principled leader. I'm looking forward to taking some of the skills that I've honed as a state representative in Tallahassee with me to Washington. I believe that we have some serious issues that need to be dealt with in Washington. We are at a precipice, I believe, and it's going to take very strong leadership to tackle the deficit and tackle the tremendous issues that we're having today with China, with the deficit, with the concerns that we've had as a result of the recent incidents with Mr. Floyd. And I am that person because I wake up every single day with a passion to serve this country. And I have gone out on a limb on a number of issues and fought hard, and I will continue to do so for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Ms. McLaughlin.
Hi friends, my name is Christy McLaughlin. I decided to jump into this race because I am the elephant in the room, not the rhino in the room. As a lifelong Southwest Florida resident, I did not find any trust in the candidates that were running for this race. This is my home. I have to protect it. Now, we have people who are pouring millions of dollars into this candidacy, into their campaigns, and they're hiding behind commercials instead of being held accountable in front of the voters, in front of the people. This is a seat for the people. It belongs to you. Now, as a lifelong resident here, I live and breathe the issues every day of Southwest Florida. And unfortunately, there are some candidates, including Casey Asgar and Dr. Fig, who have not participated in any of these debates. That is not American. We need a young, energetic voice that is going to take on AOC and Pelosi and is not going to hide behind money and try to buy their candidacy through career politicians. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to now move on to the questions. There are 7 moderator questions. I chose these questions by going through audience questions and other questions solicited by me to people who are very interested in the race, none of whom are involved with any of the candidates, to ask what's some big issues facing us. So you're going to get 7 moderator questions and then 7 that were purely chosen by audience participation. Some were sent in very late today. I tried to include a couple of those, although the program is preset. The questions were all written out yesterday so that I didn't know what order and who would go first on each question to make sure that it's very fair. So as it turns out, Representative Donald, you're getting the first question first.
No, I was supposed to go second.
No, you're number 1. You answer the first question first and then we rotate.
Oh,
See, Byron, I said you were number 1. You should like that. Okay, yes. So number 2 will get the second question first. Okay, so your question is, President Trump has voiced opposition to moving to an electoral system of mail-in ballots, citing concerns with fraud. The overwhelming majority of voters in your district vote by mail, and this system has worked well for Florida. Given our positive experience here in Florida, and particularly in this district, do you support or oppose the president on this issue, and why or why not?
thank you for the question. I support the president on this issue for one very important reason. It's because even though Florida has shown tremendous success with respect to electoral integrity, well, unfortunately, except for Broward County, Florida, but for the rest of our state, especially Southwest Florida, we have been impeccable with respect to voter integrity and ballot integrity. But we have other states in our country which allow motor-voter. They allow same-day registration. They allow massive ballot harvesting, which is the true crime when it comes to mail-in ballots. For the people here in Southwest Florida, our system, which is really the system that should be adopted across the country, is one that makes total sense. One vote for one citizen, verified by our supervisor of elections. You actually have to take your ballot to the polls and turn it in if you want to vote at the polls. What we did in the legislature this last session, what we tried to get through, was simply making sure that you couldn't collect all these ballots en masse, which is the next wave that we have to do. But listen, the president is right on this issue. We should not be allowing expanded absentee voting because it is rife with fraud if not done correctly.
Thank you, Representative Donald. All right, so now Mr. Severson, you will answer that question next. And please, if any of you need me to repeat the question, just tell me. That will not count in your time.
Okay. Well, this is a question that's near and dear to me. As I was in Minnesota, there was part of that process was the Coleman-Franken recount, where I had a bunch of people come to me talk about voter fraud. When it went from 800 for Coleman to 1,200 for Franken, we saw the whole place was invaded by people from outside the area for that recount. So the whole issue that President Trump is talking about is very real, and it's in a lot of states. And Minnesota was one of those primary states, had a George Soros plant Secretary of State. I ran for Secretary of State in 2010, lost by 3 points. In 2014, lost by 1 point. The issue really was fraudulent voting. People could go to the poll, have people vouch for them without having any identification. So when I came down here and I saw the process that Florida went through, it gave me a great amount of pleasure to see that Florida actually takes their voting system seriously, and I believe that President Trump is on the right track on this.
Thank you. Mayor Henderson, you're next for that question.
I can tell you that as mayor, I've experienced it. I've seen voter fraud up front and close. We had one citizen, I kid you not, who drove hundreds of ballots in his trunk and delivered them to our property electoral officer during my time as mayor. President Trump is definitely on the right track. I know that vote by mail can be convenient for those who choose it, and there are a lot that like it. But we have got to stamp out voter fraud. I've seen it happen firsthand. We can vote early. We have multiple ways to vote here and in person. I personally vote in person. So we're on the right track with our president. Stop the voter fraud, be vigilant, and we can always evolve into better ways as we look to the future. But being concerned about fraud is right, and I support it.
Thank you. Mr. Cowell?
By the way, we passed a law, you can't do that anymore in Fort Myers. I don't know about the county.
I support the president on this issue, and I'd even take it a little bit further. I know when mail-in ballots originally was designed for the people in the military that were overseas, and that's when we used to use them when we were deployed. And it wasn't meant for everybody that just didn't want to get up and go to the polls that day. Because I think if you're motivated and you should be responsible for voting who's going to be your representatives in Congress, you should also have the motivation to get up and vote for that person. In some states, they take advantage and just sit back and mail in ballots from home when our founding fathers wanted us to go to the polls. They wanted us to take that initiative and go and vote for the people that we feel should represent us in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Representative Eagle?
So excited.
The integrity of our voting system is paramount in this country. Otherwise, we cannot have faith in the leaders that we've elected, and should they be there, should they not. And I'll go as far as to say that the Commissioner of Agriculture should be Matt Caldwell and not Nikki Freed. Broward County, Palm Beach County failed us because of the lack of integrity in our voting system in those counties. We did go through strides in the legislative process to fix that, and as was said, Florida does have one of the best vote-by-mail systems in the country. The president is absolutely right that we need to have the checks and balances to make sure that it is done right, because you have states that are blue states, like California, like New York, that will stop at nothing to make sure that there is fraudulent activity to make sure that their Democrats get elected. So what I will work with is with our president is making sure that he knows exactly what's going on in Florida, and I know he does because he watches and he's very much paying attention, but I'm sure that at a national level, while he would be very hesitant about what some states are doing, he will look to Florida to make sure that that is applied across the entire country. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Representative Bissell.
Thank you. I believe Florida is doing an excellent job in allowing multiple ways for voters to exercise their right to vote. And I think that we have a diverse population that needs different ways to vote. I believe that we're doing a very good job of policing the polling booths. I think we have a good system for the mail-in ballots. But as you may recall, the last election cycle, it was the machines that were going awry. So I think there's always a chance for it, but we need to let people vote in the way that's best for them. We have senior citizens. We have people that are compromised, that don't want to stand in the heat outside in long lines because of COVID. And I think that whatever works best for you, you should exercise that means to vote, and I'm very confident in Florida's system. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. McLaughlin?
All right, I 100% agree with President Trump, and unfortunately I don't take that passive way of looking at it, mainly because when you're passive, that's when we lose accountability. Now, when it comes to voter fraud, we are under attack. Our democratic process is under attack. And what we noticed in Broward is that there is that lack of accountability and transparency in our voting system. We need strong rules to ensure that we do not continue down this path of voter fraud, where suddenly the Democrats who are screaming Russian collusion are saying that they want more rules and ways to avoid having accountability in our voting system. We have to maintain our democratic system in the sincerest and most transparent way.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to question 2. And with question 2, Mr. Severson, you will be starting, and then we'll go to the next person in line, which would be Mayor Henderson, etc. So here is question 2. Senator Rick Scott and Congressman Greg Steube have criticized the CARES Act for providing unemployment benefits that they believe are too generous, believing that this will serve as disincentive for people to go back to work. Do you agree with that?
It's a great question.
Thank you.
And you cannot read the hearts of individuals. You would hope that people would be, eager to get back to work, that they want to have a fulfilling career and a job. But I think they have a point to the context that there are some people that are going to abuse it. But I also believe that so many people are hurting in this whole process. So many businesses that need that help to step up. that we're gonna have to overlook some of those issues in order to make sure that the people are made whole and that they are healthy in this process, so that when we do come back from this pandemic, that everybody is best positioned to do that. Is it gonna cost us a little extra money? Yeah, probably. And are people gonna abuse it? Yeah, probably. But from a compassion side and from a pure economic side, I think that President Trump has done the right thing in this, and the Congress has done the right thing in this.
Thank you. All right, Mayor Henderson, you're next on that question.
I know that there are people always going to be gaming the system. It's going to happen. Senator Scott and others are right to hold accountable the process. At the same time, we are obliged for those who have worked hard and have earned access to unemployment, and getting it to them as quickly as possible is the charge. It is the responsibility. And no, it is never wrong to say we have to be vigilant in making sure that it's done lawfully, fairly, and that there is as minimal gaming going on as is possible. But do not be mistaken. There's plenty of gaming going on, and for our representatives to be concerned about gaming is right. The flip side of that is those who are lawful, get it to them.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. Mr. Koloff.
We have to remember the big picture here. The big picture here is the fact that due to this virus, at no fault of these people's own, they had to lose their jobs. Okay? They had perfectly fine jobs. They were working, they were feeding their families. But they were told to leave their jobs, their businesses were shut down. And when the government can do that, and they can tell you, then they better be ready to take care of you if they're going to tell you you're not allowed to work. When you're perfectly healthy to work, and you have a perfectly good job. So I do agree that if they work, they do deserve to get some sort of compensation while they're told not to work. But we cannot let them become dependent upon that compensation to the point where they get more comfortable not working. So we have to motivate them to get back to work. We need to reopen our businesses as soon as possible. That way, just by default, they will be back to work, and they won't be on the toes of the government anymore.
Thank you. Representative Eagle.
I view the government shutdown as a government taking, and therefore government owes just compensation for that taking under the Constitution. So there is a duty for the government to step forward and offer unemployment assistance and PPP assistance, and in fact the stimulus checks that were out there. The unfortunate reality is that Senator Scott and Greg Stubbe are also right, because when government gives handouts, and that handout is more than the value of the job that you have, then you are incentivized to stay home. And unless you have that innate ability or desire to get back out there, then some people are going to be incentivized to do that. That's exactly why I champion welfare reform my years in the Florida House, to make sure that fraud and abuses are out of the system, that people are responsible, and that they need to go to work and go through the work requirements while they get those handouts, so that we can eventually weed them off of it. Because nobody wants to be dependent. They want to be independent. They want to be able to go out there and go to work. But if government is incentivizing them to stay home, then the problem is on us. So we do need to fix that. We need to make sure that those offsets are not more than what they can be making when they go back to work.
Thank you. And Representative Fissenhagen.
Thank you. I do believe that we did the right thing by providing the stimulus money. The conservative Republican head of the Federal Reserve believes that it was the right move as well, because if we didn't take that step and provide people this safety net in this unprecedented time, it would put the economy in an even worse condition than it is already now. The unfortunate thing is that despite the booming economy that we've had, we have a large deficit, which is deeply, deeply concerning, and these payments are adding layers and layers on top of that deficit. So whoever goes to Washington, and I want to earn your vote to go to Washington, is going to have to tackle that very serious issue. Because right now, every single American has $80,000 worth of debt on them because of the deficit. And that's not okay. That is going to break our economy if we don't tackle it, and the time to tackle it is now.
Thank you. And Ms. McLaughlin.
The issue with this CARES Act is that the quarantine orders should not have happened in the first place to this extent. The response was disproportional to the issue of the COVID-19 virus. My experience with people is that they want to be working. They do not like to be forced to quarantine at home and unable to work. Now, unfortunately, we had representatives, including Heather, who were advocating for the quarantine orders. That was a taking. That was a taking of our fundamental rights to associate, to religion. We have lost so much through this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, with the stimulus package, it did come necessarily, given that we had the quarantine orders, but that shouldn't have happened in the first place. But I do have a solution, since it is plunging us further into debt, and that is a huge issue. We need to hold China accountable. And my proposal is we owe $1.3 trillion in debt to China. That needs to be forgiven, because this COVID-19 pandemic is due to China's negligence and purposeful action to hide.
Thank you. And Representative Donalds?
When the CARES Act was passed, and the House, the Democrat-controlled House, mind you, put in language that you will receive 100% of your compensation up to $1,000 a week. At that point, it was clear that there were going to be Americans who were going to take that 4 months worth of compensation and not return to work. Senator Scott and Representative Stubbe are correct. But at the same time, Americans we had to make sure that we took care of Americans, because they didn't lose their jobs, their businesses didn't shut down. Government stopped our economy, and it stopped our economy out of fear. And so what we gotta do, the number one thing is get back to work. But number two, with respect to the debt that's gonna be left to us, we have to engage in serious budget reforms at the Washington level. Because this problem that we've created, frankly, is gonna be worse than the disease of coronavirus itself.
Thank you, Representative Donalds. All right, so we are now on question number 3, and yes, no, Henderson, you are going to answer this first. All right, so here's question number 3, and several of you mentioned China in your answer, so here you go. This good segue. President Trump has been heavily criticized for his use of the term Chinese coronavirus or Wuhan virus to describe the pandemic. Senator Kamala Harris has proposed federal legislation to make it a hate crime to use this term. Do you agree with the president that this is an acceptable and accurate description of the virus? Do you use this description in public?
I have no problem using this description in public. It's been used for centuries and centuries. You can go back to the Spanish flu and other MRSA, you name it. It's been used. People get it. It's not offensive. Some people like to make it offensive. It is what it is. I think the origins of this in Wuhan is evident. Nobody disputes that. So making reference to its origin seems appropriate to me. No, I have no issue with it, madam. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Colo, want to tackle that question?
Short and sweet.
That's good. Then we can get more questions in.
Yes,
Okay.
it started in China. We'll call it the China coronavirus or whatever you want to call it, but like the mayor said, we've had the Spanish flu. It's country of origin is usually where we label these places, where they start, and it sticks with it. You know, that's how we describe it. That's how we determine the difference between all these different viruses and the flus we get. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. All right, Representative Eagle.
Thank you, Jason Pulaski.
The Democrats and the fake news media still fail to grasp that the reason we elected Donald Trump in the first place is because he says what needs to be said, he cuts to BS, and he's not politically correct. That's what the American people want. So no, I have no problem with it whatsoever. In fact, I've been calling for the Wuhan trials. Just like we did with Nazi Germany after World War II, we had the Nuremberg trials. We will have the Wuhan trials here, well not here, but led by America in Wuhan to make sure that we hold China accountable. We need to find out exactly what they knew, when they knew it. Did they hide anything? Was this intentional to wreak havoc on the world economy? Was it intentional to wreak havoc and cost American lives? 400,000 people in Rising have now lost their lives because of the coronavirus, and we need to have answers. Yes, we owe China. We have $1.3 billion in debt that is owed to China. That needs to be forgiven, but they owe us $4 trillion in Rising for the CARES Act, and they need to pay that back to make sure the taxpayers of America are whole again.
Excellent. Thank you. Representative Fitzenhagen.
Thank you. I do agree that the source of the coronavirus is China, Wuhan. I typically don't include that in my description just because I'm going for a little bit more brevity, like COVID-19. It just comes out a little bit faster and clearer. I do believe that we should hold China accountable, but I do think it's a little bit more a trickier business than we might think because, as was stated, there is a tremendous amount of money, the treasury bonds that the Chinese have of ours that they could sell at any point. They are our largest trading partner, $636 billion. So we are already connected, even though we might not like it, in a very integral way with the Chinese. And to extract ourselves from that and start producing things more in America and not letting the Chinese get an upper hand is what we really need to do. And I think that it's going to take leadership to get that done, and I'm that person to do it.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin.
It's funny that you asked that question in a Republican Club event, because of course we are all going to not take issue with calling it the Chinese virus because it originated in China. And for those that take offense to that, toughen up, Buttercup. The issue is with China, as I mentioned, there's a $1.3 trillion debt that the U.S. owes to China that needs to be forgiven. And the reason why, let's see what China did. They lied and were not transparent about the fact that there was human-to-human transmission with this COVID-19 Chinese virus. And the WHO is actually complicit in that hiding of the human-to-human transmission. Then they hoarded PPE. Then when they stopped travel from Wuhan to within the rest of the country of China, they still allowed travel from Wuhan to outside of China, all throughout the globe. Because China was not only negligent, they were deliberate in their actions. And that's why we need to hold them accountable. Enough's enough.
All right, and Representative Donalds.
Yes, it is the Chinese Wuhan virus. Yes, the president was right in early January to actually shut down non-essential travel from China to the United States. So while the Democrats like Kamala Harris were busy actually trying to impeach the president, he was looking after the welfare of the American people. The other thing I would add to you about Senator Harris and her bill is nobody cares what Kamala Harris thinks anyway. That's why she has to spend her campaign. Because nobody cares what she has to say. But with respect to China, yes, we have to hold them accountable. China has had some of the most favorable trade statuses in the world. Some of the trade deals that the president is renegotiating with them, now the ones that he already has done and the one he's continuing to do, is because we have had a weak hand with China for many decades in America by weak leadership. So we have to renegotiate their trade deals. We have to take away their developing nation status at the World Trade Organization. And then we have to go through the process of dealing with our debt situation with the Chinese government. But they're at fault here because they did not notify, not just us, but the world about how much of an issue this virus was.
Thank you. And Mr. Severson.
Yes, I think this is an interesting question because I think President Trump has seen from the time he was taking office that China was going to be our next huge adversary. And one of the things that we need to recognize is their gross domestic product has been accelerating to overtake us. If you take the time to read the 100-year plan that China has, they've been working on this since 1947. And so this is part of that process. Now, all of a sudden, they're out in the open. They understand that they've been exposed with this virus, with the Wuhan virus. And now we take a look at their actions towards Hong Kong. We take a look at the actions towards the Far East of Taiwan and sinking Vietnamese ships. And so you see that they're stepping up their game. We need a strong hand, which we have in President Trump. We don't need weak leadership that is apparent in the Democratic Party.
Thank you. All right, so Mr. Kowal, guess what? It's your turn to go first. This is a little bit along the same lines as the last question, but has an ultimate final question that I think everyone will be very interested in hearing everyone's answer to. So most Americans do believe that China should be held accountable for the loss of life and economic calamity that has occurred around the world. How would you do this? And if they refuse to accept any responsibility, do you think that this is grounds to go to war with China?
Okay.
bet you're glad you're going first on this one.
That's all right. So, we all know China. They held the truth from us. The World Health Organization held the truth from us, and it caused something we never thought would ever happen in our lifetime. You know, we actually shut down the United States of America. Countries like Italy totally losing their population, the elderly, by the numbers, large numbers. The thing is, I might get off the cuff here because I was in Washington, D.C. in 9/11, and I'll never forget the night of September 14th, I was in the gallery watching the Congress vote on to go to war when President Bush passed the resolution. You know, every member of Congress and the Senate voted yes except for one person. And those are the same people that are there today. We've lost our American way. We're not Americans anymore. We could never do that today. You would never get Congress to go together and go to war with China. That would not happen with Congress today.
Thank you. Representative Eagle?
I think we're still several steps away from the W word, the war word, but what I will do, and that was part of the question, is I will stand up to make sure that we have the Wuhan trials, led by America. After Nazi Germany, after we, with the Allied nations, crushed Nazi Germany and Japan, we had the Nuremberg trials. That was led by Great Britain, by the United States, by France, and by Russia, the Allied forces. And we held Nazi Germany accountable, and there were actually hangings. There were people who were held accountable for the millions of deaths across the world, and of course for the Holocaust. That needs to happen again. I'm not comparing this to the Holocaust, but there are 400,000 plus lives in counting that have been lost at the hands of China, either through intent or through negligence. Either one is bad enough because it happened at their hands. So that does need to be disclosed. But what we need to do first and foremost, not through the United Nations because they are complicit, but through America's leadership on our own with our allies who are also involved and have been affected, to make sure that they are once and for all held accountable, get the answers, and that way we avoid war. But if we need to, then yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Representative Eagle. And Representative Fitzenhagen?
I'm going to interrupt Representative Fitzenhagen for a moment. Candidates, please make sure that you project, even though we're on microphone. That way our live audience can hear really, really clearly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, I spoke about it earlier. I'm very deeply concerned about the levels to which our economy is intertwined with China, and I think we have to extricate ourselves from that and start bringing back American manufacturing here so that we are not put in a position of the high level of risk that we had during the COVID. I think that exposed a lot. We have to think about the trade. American consumers are used to getting all of the cheap products that are produced in China, and we have to stop that and make sure that we have a way to substitute those materials. I do not believe that the first step should be to think about war. I think there are other mechanisms that we can use to make sure that China is punished for the actions that they did, because they have decimated our economy and put every American life at risk and forced us to make some severe changes to our lifestyle here, and they do need to be held accountable.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin?
All right, so you know that I think we need to hold China accountable with the $1.3 trillion debt. I won't repeat myself again, even though politicians love to do that. What we also need to do is establish foreign independence. President Trump has done a fantastic job when it comes to tariffs against China and protecting us when it comes to trade deals. But something that we need to consider, because the question was about war and whether we can go to war, President Trump is establishing Space Force. And I think that's something important to consider, because it is strengthening our military. It is strengthening our United States power in case we do have to end up in that situation. Did anyone watch the launch the other day? We're getting stronger than ever. We're establishing the Space Force. So when it comes to Chinese accountability, we need to work through that as peacefully as possible. But I'm not scared, because we have President Trump leading the way.
Thank you. Representative Donalds? Oh, sure. Absolutely. Most Americans believe China should be held accountable for the loss of life and economic calamity that has occurred around the world. How would you do this? If China refuses to accept any responsibility, do you think this is grounds to go to war with China?
Yes, in the spirit, China must be held responsible because it caused serious economic damage to our country. Let's be clear. They did not tell the world, frankly, what was going on in Wuhan province. They did not. Initially, through this crisis, there was a journalist that was killed by the Chinese government to make sure that this information could not get out. So there is extensive investigations that have to go on with respect to China, and we should definitely be doing that. Now, war is a very different situation. We have to be careful when we want to talk about war. If it is clear that China weaponized this virus and unleashed this virus against the American people, now that could be grounds for war. But we do have to be careful when it comes to this, because we have been at war for a very long time in the Middle East. And there are many of us, as much as we love our country, as much as we will always defend our country, when we take that step, when we want to do that very thing, which is unleashing our military on foreign soil, it has to be done with the most information and really with the most restraint possible to make sure that we're leading in an effective way and we can win.
Thank you. And Mr. Severson?
Well, I firmly believe that China needs to be held accountable. We have called them out. At this point, they understand the implications, some of the implications. This is where a strong military, a strong foreign policy, and national security projection really gives us the ability to negotiate or go to war. Part of my background, the majority of my background is national defense. It's being in the military, it's having seen what the capabilities are of the enemy and having the intel on how do we best deploy those resources and how do we negotiate. And so for me, this is a very personal thing. It's about how can our military, which is second to none, maintain that superiority. Space Force is one of those things. But the other is how do we keep China in check with a military by protecting our intellectual property, by ensuring that they don't have access to the things that they have had access through the previous administrations, and President Trump has done a great job in that. I am a hawk.
Thank you. And Mayor Henderson?
Well, the short answer on war is absolutely not. But it builds the case for peace through a strong military. I support all the resources that we deem necessary for building a military might that keeps peace across the world and also is used to hold people like China accountable. Absolutely. No one is going to come up here and say, well, we're going to tippy-toe around China. China needs to be held accountable. I am confident that we will do that. We have demonstrated across the globe successful measures to deal with reining in the likes of China without going to war. Do we need to be prepared to go to war? We always need to be prepared. We have technology. SpaceX may contribute, but with today's technology, we need to build that so that we do not have to go to war and we settle it through different measures. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're on to the next question. And Representative Eagle, I think you're starting us off on this question. All right, the question is, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Governor DeSantis exercised his power to require checkpoints at the Florida borders and refused to allow citizens from the tri-state area, New York, Louisiana, to enter the state unless they complied with certain restrictions. Would you, so number one, did you support that? And number two, would you support the continued use of those checkpoints to ensure that everyone who enters the state of Florida is a U.S. citizen?
Number two, absolutely. I think the governor's done a phenomenal job with the cards that have been dealt to him. And it's been a very tough situation for anyone, the president especially, to be dealt with this coronavirus pandemic, which is now an economic pandemic. That is what we're dealing with now. And the governor, his hands were forced to finally do the shutdown. We were the last states to shut down, one of the first to reopen. So I think he did what was necessary. I fought against the shutdown, but of course he, I think, did what was within his executive power to make sure that we were protected. But he did not waste any time to make sure we reopened. He exercised his 10th Amendment rights under the U.S. Constitution to make sure that we are checking people at our borders as a state. That is within his constitutional rights. We need to continue to do so as long as this pandemic is pushing forward. When it comes to legal immigration, that should be up to our federal government. Obviously, they've been failing. So again, in our 10th Amendment rights, we as a state should and have the ability to continue to make sure that people who are coming here are legal citizens. We banned sanctuary cities in the state of Florida for that very reason. If that's not working, we can take it a step further.
Thank you. Representative Fitzenhagen.
Thank you. I think Governor DeSantis was spot on in having the checkpoints, and I would fully support continuing to have the checkpoints, because one of the most important things that we need to do is lock down our borders. Now, we need to lock them down at the edge of Florida, we need to lock them down all across our country, and we need to lock them down on the waterways, because we cannot afford to have anyone come in here, terrorists or people that are trying to come to work here illegally. I was the prime co-sponsor of the E-Verify bill to make sure that people are following the law and that we do not hire illegal aliens here in the state of Florida. So I fully support Governor DeSantis, and I think he made the right call. And I think that we made the right call shutting down, frankly, because we did not know what to anticipate. It was a frightening thing, but we had no idea, no way to know how deadly the virus was. And I would rather take that cautious step to make sure that lives are saved than not.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin.
I take a contrary opinion. The cautious steps, and this concept, and I'm sorry, Brian, I'm going to quote one of your own statements in one of your videos, to sit still, sit quietly and wait. Now, this attitude that we have when it comes to representatives, to sit quietly and wait and passively allow our independent rights, our personal liberties to be taken away at the scent of fear, is setting such a dangerous precedent for this nation. We are taking away personal liberties, including the 9th Amendment privilege of being able to travel between the states. That's in the penumbra of the 9th Amendment. Now, when it comes to illegal immigrants, we need to be strong on that. We need to be already checking and being very strong on illegal immigrants, making sure that they are not in this country. My family's Cuban. I'm a firm believer in that you need to be entering this country legally. But when it came to taking away our rights for United States citizens, I 100% disagree. And we've continued on this path of a slow opening because we've been too cautious.
Thank you. Representative Donalds.
Thanks for quoting me. With respect to the governor's actions, I do agree with the governor on what he did. We were at a time where the data was completely inconclusive. But we're at a point now, and the governor has not actually enacted on that in quite some time, which he was right to do. I think that the governor is moving as well as any governor in our state. Him and Governor Kemp have been doing a tremendous job about reopening our economy. They need to continue to do that. When it comes to illegal immigration, there's a duality in this. Most control of immigration is at the federal level. They are a joke because they don't even follow the laws that are on their books. They allow for things like birthright citizenship, which has never been passed in any Congress. It is something that is, frankly, a bastardization of the 14th Amendment, in my opinion. So I think the real work has to be done in DC, and you gotta have members who can actually go and do that work. Now, things that we've done in Florida are clear by banning sanctuary cities, starting the process in E-Verify. Those are things that I support going forward. I'm glad that we've done. But immigration is a two-step solution, frankly, and most of it's in DC.
Thank you. Mr. Severson.
Well, I think the governor has done a fabulous job. Hindsight is always 20/20 when you can look forward or look back and see what should have happened. The information that he was giving, he acted with compassion and yet with reserve in order not to cripple the economy. But he also made some decisive moves, and as we began to see the implications of this, began to break out early. And so when you take a look across all of the states in the United States, Florida is often held up as that model state of doing things right. The other part is illegal immigration, and it's absolutely correct. To have anchor babies, all of the things that we have in terms of allowing people to come in the lottery system, those things need to stop. And I think that the president showed his hand when he talked about giving the Democrats the DACA in that one financial bill, and they would absolutely not even take it at that point. So they are not serious about it. We need to not give amnesty, and we need to go by the rule of law.
Thank you. Mayor Henderson.
In 11 years serving as mayor, one of the primary lessons that I have learned is that one of the highest level of obligation for any government is the safety of its citizens. Governor DeSantis made the exact right move when he set up the border check for letting these into our citizens into our state. It was definitely the right call. I will tell you that I couldn't stand it any longer. My granddaughters live in Hilton Head, South Carolina. I snuck up there for 2 days recently, was stopped on the way back in, and I was glad to do it because it's keeping our citizens safe. On immigration, there hadn't been a president in recent modern history who has taken illegal immigration as serious as Donald Trump. He is moving the needle. It's the right thing to do, and it's keeping citizens safe. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Koloff.
I agree with the governor. This was a fine line he had to walk between people's constitutional freedom and keeping people safe. He had to do what he thought he had to do at the time with the numbers we knew and what was going on with COVID. We didn't know how serious it was. The problem with the program was, and I have a little insight on it because I know the troopers that participated, they were checking the cars as they were coming to the state. They weren't turning people away, but they were giving orders that they had to self-quarantine. They would go check up on them a few days later, and the people wouldn't be home. They weren't following the quarantine orders anyways. So it was a lot of manpower, a lot of money spent on a program that didn't really work the way we thought it would work. Now on immigration, I've worked in the 287G program. This was a program that President Obama basically just funded. It's a program that's been in the federal government for a long time. It's a deportation of criminal aliens. And I've had an opportunity to work here in Florida and do it. And if I go to Washington, D.C., I'll make sure President Trump knows about it, and we fund it again so we can get it working again the way it's supposed to. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Representative Fitzenhagen, you are going to answer the next question first. All right, again, on current events. What, if anything, should the federal government do to address the rioting happening across our nation as a result of the George Floyd murder in Minnesota? And if you want to also answer as part of that, if you think you have time, candidates, what should the federal government do, if anything, about bad policing practices? It's a loaded question. There's 2 parts of it. You answer one or both parts, whatever you want.
Thank you. Well, I think that our country has experienced another great tragedy because of one police officer's bad acts has now incited a whole population to be very deeply concerned and angry, and rightly so, because Mr. Floyd was murdered. So at the federal level, I believe that we have to take a strong stance against the rioting. But at the same time, I think we have to be very respectful and let people know that we understand their anger and frustration with how they've been treated. At the same time, let them know that that does not equate to looting and crime. And if, after providing some compassionate discussion, they are unable to comprehend this, we need to have that force, our might, there in the form of the National Guard or whatever it may be to intercede to keep Americans safe.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin.
So we saw the issue being, just to answer the federal government question first, when it comes to the federal government, I'm a firm advocate of the home rule, support for the home rule, which is support for the state. Now we have had a huge issue of lack of accountability in the states. Now I am the only candidate who had spoken out when George Floyd was murdered. I had posted about it, I had been vocal about it, and then I'm the only one who spoke out about the riots until I called my fellow candidates out, in which promptly Byron Donalds responded a few hours later. Now, Byron said, sit quietly and wait. Sit quietly and wait is what Amy Klobuchar did when she received the reports against Chauvin several times, many years before he killed George Floyd. Sit quietly and wait is what the state of Minnesota is doing while they're rioting and destroying their city. Sit quietly and wait is not good enough. We need representatives who will not sit quietly and wait anymore. They will be energetic and active in working for this country.
Thank you. And Representative Donalds?
Politicians have a habit of talking too much, often. And I don't actually believe that, even though I have an ability to be quite eloquent. I know my colleagues that serve with me know that. I don't talk just to talk. I talk when it matters. Everybody across our country talked about the tragedy that happened to George Floyd. I remember watching that video and I was struck, and I saw Senator Tim Scott speak And I decided, you know what, I don't need to say anything. Because Tim Scott said it for me. But when you see the riots going on in our country, I had to speak up about that. I was on Fox and Friends this morning speaking about that. Because it's important that our country understands that we all want justice. We all want peace. But that cannot be had at the hands of, frankly, domestic terrorism, of violence, of looting, of pillaging. You see, when that happens, then it's time to speak up. And with respect to the federal government, that's something that should be left to local law enforcement because they hire our officers, they train our officers, and they're the ones who are responsible for making sure that we get rid of some of these practices that lead to police brutality. Thank you.
Mr. Severson.
First Amendment says the right of the people to peaceably assemble. So it's the right for each individual to get out and let their voice be heard. Those are our constitutional rights. But when those rights are exceeded, when they become violent, then it becomes a breach of their contract, of our citizenship, and of the process that we go through. So when we talk about President Trump and his authority to declare that Antifa is a terrorist organization, it's in the semantics. The real issue is who is doing this, who is undermining our society, and do they have the free reign to do that? If we don't have governors who will take charge and will protect their people, then the next step up is the President of the United States with federal forces to be able to step in and protect those individuals who are being abused. The real issue really becomes for, unfortunately for George Floyd, having his neck stepped on by the police, then it comes to the citizens of the state who are refused due process,
Thank you, Mr.
and the mayors are doing the same thing.
Mayor Henderson.
Speaking of mayors.
Thank you. The Amendment 1 is one of the precious amendments of our Constitution. George Floyd was murdered. I was very proud of our citizens of Fort Myers for the peaceful demonstrations that they have brought forward. And I was very proud of our Fort Myers Police Department who embraced the peaceful acknowledgement of the murder of George Floyd. In addition to that, our Fort Myers Fire Department showed up to hydrate those who were peacefully expressing themselves under their First Amendment rights. And I would close by saying this: I have extensive background in reforming police departments that I never wanted, that I took. I know what that reform means. We have one of the finest PDs in the country, and it is never right. I can tell you that if anarchy shows up, it will be dealt with.
Thank you. Mr. Kowal.
Just to add, I didn't want to politicize Mr. Floyd's death. I did go on my personal Facebook, and I did say something about it. And being a professional law enforcement officer my whole life, that what I saw that day is never taught. I've never been taught it. I've never taught it as a defensive tactics instructor. You never place your knee across another human being's neck like that. You will kill them, okay? He put him in a position to die that day. I can't speak for that officer and the evil he had in his soul that day, but I'm sure it was there long before he put that uniform on. So that's for sure, okay? That being said, as a government, we do have a responsibility to protect people from a third party. And if people are peacefully demonstrating, like I participated in last night, as a law enforcement officer, we had 400 members in the city of Naples last night. We had no incidents. Everybody went home peacefully.
Thank you, Mr. Kowal. Representative Eagle.
The President swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all threats, foreign and domestic. This is a domestic threat against our government. There is an anarchist group out there right now trying to overturn our country and our government, and our President is acting within his constitutional duty to not only enforce that the states, under their 10th Amendment, issue their National Guard, and if they don't, by deploying our military. That's the unfortunate reality that we're in right now, but that is what's happening. The murder, and it was a murder, of George Floyd was wrong. That cop has been arrested, but that doesn't mean that more people need to die. The people that are out there peacefully protesting, they should and they deserve to have a voice. But there are groups like Antifa, now a terrorist organization, thank you, President Trump, for clarifying exactly what they are, that are hijacking these well-intended people and their movement and are using it to try to overthrow our government. That needs to stop, and we will use force if necessary.
Thank you. All right, so this is the last just purely moderator question, although I mixed in some of the audience questions as part of this, and then we're going to go to some audience questions. So Ms. McLaughlin, you're going to tackle this first, and you've actually mentioned, as have some of the other candidates, some of the biggest threats facing us: the Chinese, Antifa and domestic terrorism, Middle East. What do you think is the biggest threat facing the United States in the 21st century?
Well, the biggest threat, as I've stated before, is China. But since I've said that 1,006 times tonight, I'll move on to Antifa, since our president just declared Antifa to be a terrorist organization. Now, I've actually faced Antifa. When I was in DC, working on Capitol Hill in 2019 over the summer, I was standing in Trump Hotel, in which suddenly a security guard goes, "Christy, get back in the barricades." I'm like, "What? What's going on?" I turn around, and Antifa is charging us. And they've got baseball bats in their hands, and they're slapping it into their hands in this menacing way, and they've got a mask on and this aggressive face, and they're charging us. In which then the DC police is standing there on standby. They're protesting, everything's peaceful until a bottle is thrown. And then someone threatens with a bat. And suddenly, no control. And then the police came down hard. So, when it came to Antifa, we cannot continue to have passive congressional leaders. We need a strong one, someone who's going to be serious about this.
Representative Donalds.
This is a great question. There are a couple of big threats that are facing our nation. The first, obviously, is China. They're our largest adversary. They want to be the world power. It is part of their plan, and they're moving lockstep ahead while we bicker amongst ourselves here in our nation. The second one, of course, is Russia, because Vladimir Putin is still a member of the KGB. I know they don't call it that anymore, but he's still a member of the KGB, and we have to take Russia seriously. But our biggest is our internal strife in our country. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And so we have young people in our country who have never learned the principles of government. They've never learned the beauty of our country. They have been taught that socialism is okay. And some of them, unfortunately, are in our streets right now, trying to tear down the system. If we can't come together as Americans, the Chinese are going to pick our bones. And so I'm the only candidate in this race who, my 10 years in politics, I've actually spent time with young people, explaining our principles. Because our congressional members, yes, they vote, but they also must lead to all Americans.
Thank you, Representative Donalds. Mr. Severson.
Well, I would agree that China is the #1 threat. If we are able to correct this problem that we're having with Antifa, with the terrorist organizations, and actually bring those things to justice and to the light, we need to be looking at the long term to see how are we going to negotiate with somebody that has the economic power to take America down. And when we take a look at their GDP, as I said before, we need to ensure that those companies that are overseas, that have been taken over by China, come back here, we make it a profitable situation, and that we continue to grow our economy. If we cannot grow our economy, we will succumb to China, and they have a plan to do that. So I really believe that in order for us to make those changes, that we have to have people in Congress that are savvy on how do we defend this country, not just economically, but militarily, and that's why I believe I'm a candidate for this office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson.
Well, once again, what I've learned as mayor is that we can agree on who the threats are. I think that we need to pour substantial resources into cybersecurity to protect our nation. It is the most prominent threat to us from all of those nations that have been mentioned. That's the threat that we don't see as the invisible threat. I believe that the threats that are visible to us are ones that we can solve. And we certainly do have to come together as a nation. And our United States does come together when we have threats. Cybersecurity would be a top priority for me to stop all those who do have evil intent against the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Koloff.
can all agree China is definitely our biggest threat right now in the world. But China just wants to be, they want to be part of this world market. The problem with China is they've never invented anything themselves. They've always stole all the technology from us, and we let them do that. They just make things cheaper and faster and more of it. And we buy it. That's the problem. We buy their products, and that's what makes China strong. And other things, we borrow money from them. But the biggest problem is right here at home. It's our representatives in the House of Representatives right now. It's broken. I mean, it is broken. Like I said before, a little earlier, I witnessed that vote that night on September 14th, 2001, when everybody came together as Americans. They didn't have a D, they didn't have an R, they didn't have an I next to their name. They all came together for one cause, because we were attacked. Our soil was attacked. We could never do that today because of the hatred for our president. Their hatred is clouding their brains to the point where they can never be Americans again. And that's what we got to get back to. We're never going to beat anybody.
Representative Eagle?
Our biggest threat right now domestically is socialism. And that's why I commend this group for doing what you do every single day by being active and make sure that you're getting our conservative principles out there, having these discussions and making sure that you're electing the right people. Antifa's here now, but they won't be tomorrow. We will defeat Antifa, but it'll rear its ugly head again under whatever name you want to call it. Socialism is creeping into this country, and it's happening in Congress. We've seen the elected officials, AOC and her squad, Nancy Pelosi, Bernie Sanders trying to take the presidency. We cannot let socialism rise. That is our threat domestically. Our foreign threat is, of course, China. This is the new Cold War. They were allies after World War II as we went on to the new great stage, but now they want to be the biggest power in the world, military and economically. We are standing in their way, and they will stop at nothing to defeat us. They are not our friends. I was in Taiwan. I led a trade mission to Taiwan. Spencer was there with me this summer. We were under that shadow, that threat, with these freedom-loving people as the Hong Kong protests started coming to a head, and we had to flee that country. I saw it firsthand. They hate freedom, and they will stop at nothing to destroy us. We need to stop them first.
Thank you. And Representative Fitzenhagen?
Thank you. I believe that our biggest singular threat to this country is ourselves. I have never, in my lifetime, and I didn't live through the Vietnam era, but I have never seen us so polarized in all of my years of living. Now, we really need to figure out a way in which to rationally communicate with each other, disagree with each other, Democrats and Republicans, and still get something done. There is no respect at all between the parties, and there seems to be no room for discussion. If we don't pull it together, I think we're at a precipice, and we need to find a way to come together as Americans, or we will lose everything. All the litany of things that have been mentioned by the other candidates, I agree with 100%, but it's critically important that we stop the hate and start talking to each other in a respectful way and get something done.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to some different questions. Now, these questions are a little bit shorter, much shorter. If you can answer these with a yes or no, please do. Many of them can be answered with a yes or no, or very simple answer. We can get through a couple more of them. So we're back to you, Representative Donald, who's starting us off. And here is the question. This is an audience question. When is the last election in which you did not vote, and why did you not vote? If you can remember that.
The last election that I did not vote, that might be when I wasn't registered to vote.
Okay. All right.
I think that's about it.
Okay. Mr. Severson.
I voted at 18 and I voted ever since. Military absentee ballots.
Okay. And Mayor Henderson.
I have no recollection of missing a voting opportunity in the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cowell.
When I was 17 years old.
Representative Eagle.
I first voted in the Bush v. Kerry election, and I voted in every primary and general election since, but you may want to look at the voting records of some of the people that aren't here.
Representative Fitzenhagen. And I guess as a hint, I should ask that question. question at the next forum.
Thank you. I do not recall, but I will tell you that I feel so blessed to be an American and be able to go out and exercise that right to vote. It's just the most overwhelmingly wonderful thing that we have to be able to do in this country, and I'm glad that I get to do it, and again, very soon.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin.
I have voted in every election since I was 18 years old. I know I'm very young, so that's not very many, but I've voted in every single one. Now, this is an opportunity to say that young people need to be voting. We need to inspire our youth to get out the vote, to be more involved in the Republican Party. Because as Dane mentioned with AOC, have you ever met AOC? I have.
Sorry.
Albeit a very impassing meeting, but that girl is the loudest person I have ever met, and I was raised by Cubans, okay? She is the loudest girl, and we need to get louder than those socialist voices, and we need young people to do so.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Severson, you're going to start us off on this question. Will you become a member of the House Freedom Caucus?
Yes.
Okay. We can actually just pass the microphone, if you would, for this one. Mayor Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. Colall.
Yes.
Representative Eagle.
Yes.
Representative Fitzenhagen.
No.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes.
And Representative Donalds.
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Henderson, you're going to start us off on this one. This one's maybe going to take you your minute. Would you be in favor of a Parents' Bill of Rights that would force schools to inform parents of controversial topics being addressed in a classroom that might offend their spiritual or other beliefs?
I would absolutely support that. I think a parent who brings a child into this world has every right to secure the opportunity to protect their child if something is a threat to their child. I have no problem with that. I have raised 3 children with my wife, and any opportunity or any information that I might gain an opportunity to protect my children, I'd be all over it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colall.
Yes, I would support it. It's a parent's job to teach their children these lessons, not our schools. Okay, we need parents to start taking the responsibility back, and not our schools raising our children. We're supposed to educate our children. The values are supposed to be from the parents.
Thank you. Representative Eagle.
Yes, as a soon-to-be parent, I believe that a parent has every right to know everything of what is happening to their minor child under the age of 18, which is exactly why we passed the parental consent notice for abortion just this past year, making sure that that is a thing of the past and parents do have a right to know.
Representative Fitzenhagen.
Yes, I do, and I think it's critically important to emphasize that the relationship between the school and the parent is important, because the parent needs to be able to be aware of what's going on at the school to help their child prosper and to get the information they need to follow up at home. So I think that's a very important thing, and the parents need to be engaged in what's happening at schools.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes, and I find it very interesting because that same process of thinking should have been applied then to the parental consent bill when it came to a minor getting an abortion. Because I'm pro-life without exception, other than the health of the mother. And I think when it comes to voting against a consent bill, goes against the same concept of having parents be aware of what's going on in their schools. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, I'm a teacher. I'm a certified teacher in the state of Florida. I've taught 1st grade and 4th grade, and I know the indoctrination that's going into schools. So yes, we need some laws that are protecting the rights of the students. Not the other way around. We don't need a federal mandate onto our schools, but we need to have federal protections for their personal liberties of freedom to not be indoctrinated by schools who have total control over the student.
Thank you. Representative Donalds.
The answer is yes. We definitely need to make sure that parents have the authority in every aspect of what's going on in their child's life, including education. But I think it's important, since we are talking about one of us going to be in the United States Congress, not the Florida legislature, this is a matter for states. In the Florida legislature, it was Representative Aaron Brawl who actually has written a bill like this that we have worked hard to try to get passed in Florida the last several years. But at the federal level, in my opinion, frankly, we should be getting rid of the Department of Education totally, and we should be block granting Title I money directly to states so that they can have control over these apparatuses when it comes to education and work more closely with our parents on the local and state level.
Thank you. Mr. Saberson? Yes. Would you be in favor of a parent's bill of rights that would force schools to inform parents of controversial topics being addressed in the classroom that might offend their spiritual or other beliefs?
Yes, I would. And I believe that if there needs to be a Department of Education at the federal level, that should be their primary focus. I believe that the parents have the primary responsibility, and having that responsibility, they need to be informed on what the schools are teaching them. I do agree also that there should not be a Department of Education at the federal level, but all of the best interests of those child are at the local level. It's best to control it at the local level. But absolutely, in order for the children, and I can tell you, I've had 2 kids, and I had them come home, and we sit at the dinner table, and all of a sudden something comes out of their mouth, and you go, where did that come from? So we go to the school, and we start asking questions. That's the parent's responsibility, and that is what makes for healthy families. This process, I think, would add to that.
Thank you. All right, we're going to do one more question before we do closing. So that means, Mr. Kowal, you're going to start us off for this last question. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get through the whole group again for first to go, but you'll start us off for this one. The question is, candidates, where do you stand on limiting the power of the federal government concerning healthcare decisions, including mandatory vaccinations?
I don't think the federal government should get involved in making anything mandated to the people with talking about vaccinations. I think that's on a local level and with the people, the parents, especially with their own children, on what they should or shouldn't do with their own children's bodies.
Okay, thank you. And Representative Eagle.
I don't think the federal government should have anything to do with health care. I've read the U.S. Constitution. I can't find that in there. That is up to the states to decide, and free market reform is what we've done here in the state of Florida. When it comes to vaccinations, no government entity has a right to tell you what to put in your own body. You have the right to choose that for yourself.
Representative Fitzenhagen.
This is a really tough question for me, and I'll tell you why. Because the federal government, I believe, has an overriding duty to keep us safe and protect us. And so if we don't make sure that the entire population is safe from a particular disease by not vaccinating, then that might be okay at the state level if everybody always stayed in their state and it was only that state's issue if some person that wasn't vaccinated and infected someone else. So, but we're traveling across states and all over. So that is a tricky one. I do think it's good to have consistent vaccinations when it comes to protecting our kids from diseases. I don't want some of these terrible childhood diseases like my mom had polio to come back. So I think it's super important to consider this thoughtfully.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin.
I'm sorry, I don't even know why you're running as a Republican at this point. This is just, you cannot have government mandate to enforce vaccinations on an individual. So we have my body, my choice until suddenly it's for the health of others. My body, my choice obviously doesn't work when it comes to when you're carrying a child in the womb, but it is your decision because it's an infringement on personal liberties yet again. We do need a free market reform though in healthcare. The federal government should have way less control. We should have a very individualized concept for healthcare when it comes to allowing insurance to be purchased across state lines, more competition, foreign state purchasing of drugs, and that way we have more transparency when it comes to drug purchasing, and we have a more holistic and healthier medical system.
Thank you, Representative Donalds. Sure. Where do you stand on limiting the powers of the federal government concerning healthcare decisions, especially including mandatory vaccinations?
The federal government doesn't have any authority in this matter. I've read Article 1, Section 8. I'm quite sure many of you have as well. And that's not a power of Congress. And anything like that that's described in the question would have to be legislation through Congress. And Congress does not have the constitutional authority to pass legislation, even though they have. But they don't have the constitutional authority to do it, then it shouldn't be done. Now, where do I stand on that and many other issues? The federal government should be limited to the writings of the Constitution, no more, no less. The issues we're facing in our country, in part, is because the federal government has become an amoeba, the way Woodrow Wilson wanted, as opposed to a constitutional republic as created by our framers. Our states have powers and flexibility. They have representatives of their own. They have budgets, and they lay taxes on citizens as well to handle all of these things. So we have to get back to the right constitutional framework. They have no role in that. Now, with respect to vaccinations, that's up for a parent to decide. I vax my kids. That's my decision as a parent. Every parent's got to decide that for themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Severson. I looked at my list wrong for a second. You think I know it by now?
And it's the beauty of America, that we have 5 incubators, or 50 incubators. We have 50 states that run independently, and they are approved to the other states whether or not a system works. So I really believe the federal government needs to get out of the whole healthcare issue. It will ameliorate a lot of our federal taxes and all of the things that are pushed into that, but also deregulate the whole process, which is exactly what needs to take place. It needs to be a free market system in which every individual is responsible for their own health care and has a free market look at how that health care is run, whether the finances, the medical practices, all of those things. As tends to vaccines, I am not a big vaccine kind of guy. I don't believe that, and particularly with a lot of the fetal tissue that's being used in these vaccinations, that is creating some of the things that we have not seen before, and so I would oppose mandatory vaccination.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson.
All I can do is relate it back to my personal life, and the Obamacare made my life very complicated when I was lied to, and my choice of doctors was taken away. I like to get my advice not from the federal government. I like to go to my trusted healthcare professional and ask them what I ought to be doing about my health care for me, my wife, my children. My wife seeks her advice from her professional health care provider, and if our health care provider says that our children should have vaccines, then we trust in that. And the federal government has done nothing but take away my choice and impose upon me a penalty if I want to choose a health savings account. The federal government should stay out of it. I like a free marketplace. Insurance should, by the way, be able to pass across state lines. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, candidates, did everybody answer that question? Okay,
I have one Facebook question for you.
go ahead. Well, let me see it. Because let's see, this might, Representative Eagle, they might have figured out you're going first next. Let's see. Oh, yes, okay. I think that you can all answer this fairly quickly. Will each one of you support whoever gets the nomination for this position? Representative Eagle, you're first on this. You can.
Yeah, you can. I'll just.
This is the beauty of democracy, being able to come here with like-minded people and have discussions. You can discern the differences and make your choice, but when it comes to August 19th, I will be behind the nominee. I hope that's me. If it's not, I will be behind that person 110%, making sure not that he or she get elected in November, but President Trump gets elected as well. We need to band together as Republicans.
Representative Fitzenhagen.
Yes, I absolutely will support the nominee.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes, I will. Most of you have known me since I was 18 years old as a participant in our local Republican Party. You've seen me grow up. I have supported the Republican Party, and I will continue to support the Republican Party no matter what.
Representative Donalds.
I mean, what other choice do I have? The Democrats? I mean, they're crazy. Absolutely, I will be supporting the nominee, but without making a light of it, folks, the country is at a crossroads. We need all hands on deck. So whether I win or lose, I'll be there fighting for the president and for our nominee come November.
Thank you, Mr. Severson.
Yes, absolutely, and it's an honor to be running with such distinguished candidates. It's enjoyable, and this evening has been enjoyable.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson.
I respect each and every one of you. This is my 7th campaign in my life. It is hard work. I respect you all. I would definitely support the nominee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kowal.
Yes, I will support 110%. And I want to thank everybody in this room and the other people here running that given me an opportunity to stand up here and talk to everybody tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we certainly appreciate all of you, and now we're going to finish this up with brief 1-minute closing statements, as we call them in court, or closing arguments, which you are welcome to do during your closing. So Representative Donalds, you are going first on this, please.
Oh, first again? Okay.
Yes, because primacy recencies, whoever gets to go first in the opening, the opposite person gets to go last in the closing, if that makes sense. Yeah, so you go first and vote. Whoever goes last in the closing gets the benefit.
I have a good quip though. No, it's not. Listen, first of all, thanks so much for coming. It's actually great to be in a room again, to be around people, actually talk to people, and not have to do it through screens. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks for watching online. Listen, folks, you got a choice to make. There's always a time for choosing in elections. We're all Republicans. We are conservative. A lot of us are going to do some of the same things. Some of us are going to be more conservative than others. But who do you want actually going toe-to-toe with AOC and Nancy Pelosi? Who do you actually want going toe-to-toe with Chuck Schumer from New York? Or whoever the Democrats are try to roll out next? Because there will be a next. We are a divided nation right now, unfortunately. That's because of the left. And so we have to send not just conservatives, but conservatives who can take our principles to all voters. Conservatives who have an ability to reach all Americans. Because our country is at stake. And we have to send our very best. And I believe I'm that candidate, and I am asking for your vote. So God bless you. Thanks for coming out this evening, and I'll see you on the trail.
Thank you. Mr. Severson.
It's an honor to participate tonight. Obviously, I think I am the best candidate. I have the experience, the background, both in the military and legislatively. I'm the only one here who has served in the legislature to have served in the minority. So I know what it's like to fight a Democrat toe-to-toe. I know when they bring those bills to the floor and they're absolute atrocities, how you have to get up and you have to defend your the things that you believe in and bring those things to the public who is listening to that debate. And I have stood the line. I have, as a minority whip in the Minnesota legislature, I held the line against $3.2 billion in tax increases, and it went on from there. Advocated for veterans benefits, judicial reform, those things I have experience in. I have the fight pilot in me still to do what's right for America and to be Trump's winger. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Henderson.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Randy Henderson. I am a father. I am a husband. I am the mayor of Fort Myers. I am battle tested. I have seen the worst of the worst. I have seen the best of the best. I've held a weeping mother whose child's life was taken so soon, and I've played hardball with those who have attempted to deal with our city when it was necessary. I am the best candidate because I am the most experienced and the most successfully experienced candidate. I will go to Washington and help President Trump because I have built a city under the same conservative principles that he has used to move the United States forward. It's worked for me, has worked for my city, I will be a great partner with President Trump. Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Moderator.
You're welcome. Mr. Colo.
Everybody stood up here and talked about all the campaigns they've been involved in. This is my very first. And I'm gonna go to Washington DC because I think Washington DC is broken. Like I said before, I'm out there every day amongst the people. I hear what their problems are. I hear what bothers them. And I think I can be that voice. I can take that to Washington DC. I'm not gonna be the voice of whoever was my highest donor or some lobbyist or some political figurehead or the Washington machine. I'm gonna be for the people. I'm gonna be the voice of the people. Okay, that's what I wanna be. The silent majority needs a voice. And that's who I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Eagle.
Thank you all for braving the very dangerous COVID-19 to be out here today. And I say that somewhat sarcastically. Obviously, we're on a much better trend, and we are going to beat this and get our economy back on order. But I appreciate seeing people face to face. You have a choice to make. You have a lot of choices. You get 10 people that you get to choose from. I think it's the first time it's happened in CD19. And you've got some fine people here to choose from in the room, and you've got people that didn't show up today. Remember that. These people are going to try to buy your vote with 30-second ads. They don't even vote in elections, and they have the goal to ask you for their vote. We've been down that road before. This will be the 5th congressperson that we elect in CD19 since 2012. We can go down that road again, or you can pick what's tried and true. What sets me apart from the rest is I have the most legislative accomplishments, and I am the most conservative in this race. I grew up in this area. I'm born and raised. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to serve this community until it's time for me to move on and the next person can do so. But I came up through this community, became the Republican majority leader, and I am asking for your vote so that I can make CD19 proud and deliver results, defend our Constitution, our president, and our country. You can learn more at daneagle.com. I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you. Representative Fitzenhagen.
Thank you. I am so proud to be an American, and I'm very proud to be a Republican. I'm also proud to be a Republican because the Republican Party is not monolithic. There's room for different types of Republicans. And I'm a different type of Republican. I'm very open-minded, and I listen to issues, and then I make decisions after I've looked at all the facts. I believe in my heart of hearts that we need to come together. So I have fought hard for issues in Tallahassee that I cared about, but I've also reached across the aisle and tried to build a relationship with people that I didn't agree with, because I think it's so important for us to come together and get something done. So if you send me to Washington, I will be fighting, but I will also be reaching across the aisle to work with people, to make things happen. And I love this country, and I want to continue to work with you. Please check me out, heatherfitzenhagen.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Ms. McLaughlin.
Thank you all so much for your time. The reason why I'm running is because we have career politicians in this race. We have people trying to buy the race when Southwest Florida is not for sale. This is my home. Lifelong resident, never left, and I will not accept that. Now, when it comes to reaching across the aisle, it's a great idea, but we gotta win back the House. We have to. It's our only choice because that's the only way we're going to get anything done. And when it comes to going toe-to-toe with our Democrat adversaries, with AOC, Ilhan Omar, we had a Democrat debate run by a Democrat organization with students in Southwest Florida, and they were all constituents, in which myself and Dan were the only 2 people that showed up of the Republican Party. How are these candidates going to go toe-to-toe with AOC and the squad if they can't even face the Democrats in their own district? We need to do better than do-nothing politicians. Thank you. My website is christyforcongress.com.
All right, candidates, thank you very much. I want to say that this is a wonderful field, and we all thank you for having the bravery to get in front of all of us and answer tough questions. Thank you to all of you. Now, very important candidates, I think that every one of you here is coming to a forum on Monday at KJ Steakhouse, and you need to make a menu choice and let me know if you're bringing anyone, because I'm moderating that. Doris has been helping me coordinate that, so could you please see me before you leave? and tell me what your menu choice is, and Doris will help you with what those choices are, if she can remember. And if you're bringing anyone, so we can get some housekeeping matters. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you. That will be at KJ Steakhouse. I will be the moderator. Lee, Republican Women Federated, will be hosting that. I have many more questions, everybody, pages worth. So you can look forward to some different questions on Monday. So we hope to see you all. Thank you, Missy. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Amira, for moderating this. That was amazing. You are always amazing. We will close this out. I just want to go over a couple of things. If I could have your attention. I want to thank all of you.
Attention.
Thank you,
All of
everybody.
you candidates for putting yourself out there and for doing this. This is not easy. I also want to highlight the fact that our President Trump, has a 96% approval rating in the Republican Party. He's the most unifying president that I can recall. Now, somebody told me that Reagan had a 96%. I don't know if that's true. This club is a combination of two very important clubs. The Lee Republican Women's Club and the Republican Women of Cape Coral merged. We believe the Republican Party is a big tent, and we need to be kind to each other. So I was so happy to see all of you say that you would support the nominee. Okay, so thank you for that. And I did want to say that our next meeting, it's July the 7th. It is another forum in our series for State House Representatives District 77 and 78. It will be July 7th, a very similar format, but hopefully we can have more of you here live. Thank you for participating in our live audience. I also wanted to say that Women of Distinction Awards Program and Gala has been moved to July 31st. We have previous Women of Distinction winners in our midst right now. We have Therese Everly from New Health. We have Heather Fitzhagen from, Therese was 2019, Heather was 2018. So we have a wonderful group of women who are finalists for 2020. We are looking for sponsorships, and obviously tickets can be purchased online as well. I just wanted to say, God bless all of you for what we've been through. God bless you for supporting our president, all right? And God bless President Trump, and God bless America.
Amen.
Thank you all.